Good morning, everybody. I am so glad I had a chance to hear Linda talk this morning. I've heard some of her stuff before. I've read about fixed and growth mindset, but boy, were there some eye-openers in there. So that was amazing. And I'm sitting there thinking about some of the things I'm going to be talking about today and where I was fixed and where I had the right mindset. I'm not sure we're all one or the other. There are different times and different growth patterns, but I really found that fascinating. I'm not much on the academia side, so to see the actual research, I thought was amazing. So today I'm going to be talking about my leadership transformation story, and a key thing in there for me was learning to let go. I am going to talk about some tools that I've picked up along the way. I apologize, some of it's just going to be story at you, but the tools in particular, or if you have some of your own transformation moments that you want to share, or if you have tools, questions on the tools, or some of your own that you found, I would love for that to be more interactive. So let's find out. So my name is Julie Urban, and this is not working. That's a good start. Did it go there? Okay. Am I too far away, maybe? All right, we'll find out. All right, my name is Julie Urban, and I've been in the high-tech industry for over 35 years. I was an engineer, and then a manager, and then a director, and now I'm an Agile coach and Scrum Master. This is not going to work that far away. That stinks. I have a hard time standing still with these things. Bummer. I don't think so, but we can, it says it's got battery, right?
Okay. Wow, okay.
I'm not sure if this is going to help, but I'm going to try it.
Worth a shot, right?
I don't know. All right, I'll try to stay in one place. Okay, I'm going to tell my story very slowly through something called higher power trips. I don't know if you know what that term means, but you might also think of messages from the universe, or as Oprah calls them, aha moments. And I suspect you've probably had some in your life and your career. What they are moments of clarity. So you're going along, and maybe even these things were possible before, but you have this moment of clarity from something that happens about a possible path for you. And it's like the light suddenly shines on that path, and you couldn't see it before that. Now, you still have to walk the path yourself, but suddenly it's like there's clarity that that is possible for me, and maybe even right for me. And so I've had a few of those along the way, and they tend to really stick in my mind and be the big learnings for me. So we're going to start right here. Oh my gosh. This is terrible. All right, I'll be behind the podium. Well, I'm not sure if it's that. Oh, you mean you would sit back there? Oh, you. What's your name?
Rachel.
Rachel. You can take a chair, maybe, if you want. Thank you. We'll see how this works. All right. So this is my high school graduation picture. I just went to my 40th high school reunion this summer. Even saying that curdles my skin, but I had never gone, and I went and I had a great time. So I am old, not as old as Linda. So I came out of college. I was smart, and I was a hard worker, but I was very shy, capital I introvert, and I am not joking. I barely talk to people. So I was not a leader, not because I was an introvert, but I was not a leader. I didn't have that thought in my head. I played a lot of team sports. I was always a hard worker, the most improved, but not the MVP, never the captain. I just didn't have leadership. It wasn't even a thought that I could be that. So that's where I started in this journey. Go ahead. And I was doing fine as an engineer, and then I had my first higher power trip. My manager at the time came to me and said, "You have very good judgment. I need you to speak up more." And that sounds really simple, right? But for me, it was just like, wow. And he didn't say, hey, that'd be nice if you speak up more. I need you to speak up more. And it was extremely powerful for me at the time. And I was able to use that clarity to start walking down that path and speaking up more, gaining confidence. And that was wonderful, and it was very enlightening, and my career took off a little faster, became a technical leader of teams. Go ahead. So I had a wonderful project, and I was the technical leader, and I just loved it. And I had other people on my team, but I was working long hours because it was like it was my creation, right? And you might say maybe I didn't trust them enough to do it, and there was probably some of that, but mostly it was just, I loved this. I worked long hours, and if over drinks over later you want to hear a funny story about why there's a rule in our house about no naked computing, I can explain that. but I love it, and I was just so into it. So time for another higher power trip. Very good, she's right there. This is later on, so a different manager said, I need you to keep the plate spinning. I'm like, huh? You know, keep the plate spinning. Try to help the others so they can all contribute more to this project rather than most of it being on you. And I'm saying, if you want this project done faster, give me a corner office with a door, right? Get me out of these cubicles. That'll get you the project done faster. He says, you're not hearing me. I need you to help the others so we can get some more done. I need you to share the work. So time for another higher power trip. It suddenly gleaned in what that was going to do beyond me. It was not only going to get the project done faster, and it did, I'm sure, it actually gave those folks a chance to grow more. And it's not like they were unhappy. They didn't know any different. But as I started to hand them pieces and coach them through it, obviously we came out with a much stronger team than we went into that, right? Obvious, I know, but this was a long time ago. And share the work. What's another work for share the work? What's another word for share the work? Delegation. I'm sure as leaders, we're all perfect at that. And there are two primary reasons to delegate, right? The second one is to get work off your plate so you can go solve higher level problems. What's the primary reason? Help people develop. I was taking away opportunities for others by the way I was operating. So again, I know this is basic leadership 101, but this is my transformation along the way. Okay, so now that was a successful project, and that manager left, and they said, we want you to be the manager. Now you have to realize, again, coming from an introvert, my goal was to be in a corner office and the technical guru by the end of when I retired, right? I had no desire to be in management, but they pulled the old trick of, if you don't do it, we're giving it to him. Guy I was never gonna work for, right? So I said, okay, I'll do it for a year. And they laughed at me because they knew what I didn't, that people problems are so much harder and interesting than technology problems. And so by the end of that year, I was hooked. So I, of course, going from doing the work to being the leader, the manager, I had to learn, oh, I can't do the work. All those things about letting go and shifting your role, that can take a little while. But I was able to do that, and we actually had some pretty productive teams, happy teams, going along. I'm from Minnesota, so we were plowing through the snow at a great rate. Except notice in that picture, whoops, sorry. You're doing great. I'm kind of holding the reins, right? If this is a team, I'm driving. So that's when I started to learn a little bit, at least the first understanding of collaborative leadership, and realize how I was holding them back still. Even though I was no longer doing the work, I was still driving and still making the key decisions and things like that. So I actually started to lead in a more collaborative way, and we got even better. Okay, now hit it. At that point now, we were operating in a more collaborative way. So things started just going fantastic. I mean, I was getting bigger projects, more teams. I became director of engineering for a $1 billion product. Everything was lovely. Enlightened, empowering manager. Okay, that means it's time for another higher power trip. Okay, at that point, my company had been merged with Symantec, and they started something called the Symantec Women's Action Network, or SWAN. And I was actually, it's cute. I was the highest level female at my site at the time, so I was automatically champion for the SWAN. So I'm like, oh, whatever, I'm busy. Held a meeting, went back to my work. The next day, in walks this whirlwind of energy. Her name was Sarah Fort Kramer. And she walked in, she was a QA engineer, and she said, why aren't we doing more with this SWAN thing? We could be supporting the women that are at our site. We could be doing so many amazing things. And as she was talking, it was just another one of those moments of clarity. And it was about connectedness. So I was a tomboy, and I feel like a number of things that women are supposed to do, I never got the memo. Like, I don't do makeup. I don't get it. I don't know how. So I just never felt this need for the connectedness. And I don't know if it's because I did team sports and had brothers or whatever. I did fine in a male-dominated world. I didn't understand this need. But slowly through her, I got to see how much better these women operated when they felt connected and supported and that real connection. Oh, guess what? I changed. I felt different having that connection, right? And I was working with my teams even at a higher level. So it was a big moment for me. Then the aha, it's not just women who need connectedness. I think working in a male-dominated world, it wasn't as obvious because the women, it's easier to feel disconnected because at least there's mostly men around. But the men appreciated that and worked better when they're engaged and connected too. So, and the connectedness is not a passive thing. That's the other thing, is there's still this introvert in me. You have to reach out, especially if you're in a leadership role, right? And sometimes that's awkward or not fun, but you have to do it. And again, it takes things to the next level. So, you go, girl. Things are going great. Or maybe not. At the time, I had a VP who was very much a ladder climber and protected his teams, but all other teams were crap. And he had a certain view of the people on his staff, and that if you didn't want his job, you weren't any good. So I didn't want his job particularly then. I had plenty of challenges that I was working on. And every time I went into a one-on-one, I had to put a false mask on, right? I had to tell him what he wanted to hear. Because you could see there was just no way I could talk to him about what I find of value or what I think I bring to the table, because it looks different than the classic standard stuff he might think about. So I just, time after time, put this mask on and went in there. Well, that eats at you. When you can't be authentic, it drains you. It takes so much energy to keep that false mask up, and you're fighting it inside, and you just feel crappy. And that's what was happening. So good news is he climbed the ladder up and away, and we got a new VP. So I'm taking my lesson learned on authenticity, and the new VP decided he was going to re-interview all the staff. And so I went into that interview and said, look, I've had a chance to actually lead almost every part of this organization. I find challenges in all of it. I think I can help you in any of them. So you pick where you want me. Where can I help the business? Where can I help you the most? And that just felt wonderful to me. So proud of that. Well, at the same time, all of my male colleagues were going in and saying, I want this piece or I'm leaving. Every single one of them. And, of course, what happened? As it spun around, I was taken off the staff. Then they started slowly taking my teams away from me. Then they demoted me. That director of engineering I'd fought so hard for, no more. And I learned, by the way, that I was much more attached to that title than I thought I wanted to be. That was so hard. This was my first real career failure, right? It was devastating. And the worst blow is then they put me under a micromanager. I've only ever once worked for a true micromanager. and it is hell. I have some tricks I learned if you're currently living that and want to hear them later. So going along, everything is negative. And in fact, I wasn't the only one who was having a lot of negativity. It turns out, by the way, this VP was not set up for success. He was a brilliant architect. He had managed about 30 people in one location prior to this job. He was handed an organization of 600 engineers across 3 countries, like that. Do you think that's a recipe for success? Pretty unlikely. He also was an alpha male very much, and there's nothing wrong with that per se, but he put all alpha males on his staff. And it literally, like, for budgeting and strategy and control of resources, he would take the stake and throw it in the middle and say, you guys fight it out. Can you imagine what the people were feeling down below all that? What kind of toxic environment that was for everybody at that point? Probably including some of the people, because it brought out the worst in some of those leaders. Some of them that I had worked with prior to that I actually appreciated working for. It like brought out the worst in them. So there was negative talk in the halls, up, down, left, right. And I was steeped in negativity. So, I'm standing in the hall, yet again, a negative talk, standing with a friend of mine who had worked for me, and we'd done some wonderful projects together. He happens to be 6'3", so I'm looking up. And suddenly I went, oh my God, I don't even recognize myself. I have never been like this. I don't even like myself right now. And he kind of was surprised, and I suddenly realized that was my aha. The career failure, the failure in this story was not getting demoted, was not taking the teams away. The failure was how I was handling it. I was a leader. I was still totally perceived as a leader in that company, and I was walking around being part of the negativity, right? That was the failure. So at that point, I started changing my talk, and I started to look for the positive. Started to look for the things we could control. Because no matter how bad your current leaders might be, or certain things that are just causing problems about the way they operate, if you look deeper, there are always more things you can control, maybe down at those lower levels, right? So what can we improve down where we have a say? Let's go do that. And it was amazing, because you know how negativity can spread, and in a toxic environment, it can get really sticky even. But if a leader is being positive, it's stronger. You could see how that grew. And people were just, it's like they were so thirsty for it, right? So that was a big aha for me. And then it turns out, by the way, within a year, all of them were gone, because that's not a very productive way to run a business. And I still feel bad for that VP, because his leaders did him a big disservice. And so part of what I learned here, I love this quote, if you stumble, make it part of the dance. So something bad happened to me, right? But we talked about the agile mindset versus by learning from it and embracing it. And you know what? Not denying that it happened. Because you've been in companies when something along this line happened to somebody, they're persona non grata. And most of the time, they're out that door. And people have asked me why I didn't leave. Maybe part of it was my confidence was down. But the truth is, I love those people. I love that team. I knew I still could have an effect there, at least once I came out of my funk. And that's why I didn't leave, because that turnaround happened. They were still leaders for a while there. And in fact, I think I'm in such a much better place about how I think about leadership, how I think about what I want to be doing, what role I want to be playing. So the stumble, making it part of your dance, not denying it, but incorporating it, learning to surf the waves is huge. When people did come ask me that were at the company later, I talked about those kind of things, and their eyes kind of got opened, because I'm doing a very different job now, right? And they're like, are you okay with that? Because it doesn't have the prestige of director of engineering. It's like, I love my job, you know? And that's very, I think it was very educational for others when I was able to just talk about that. So Remember back here, when I was the enlightened manager before that last learning, and I was such a collaborative leader? I really think, I thought at that point, like, I have this, right? I know how to do collaborative leadership. Notice right here, there's kind of one guy still kind of talking, right? It's not truly a collaborative situation there. That's me still, right? But I didn't recognize it. So at this point, again, those folks are gone. Some other leaders came in. We have lots of changes in leaders. We got a new VP. Her name is Sue McKinney, by the way. She currently is a senior VP at Anaplan. She had done some agile transformations at McKinney and Pitney Bowes, I think, or not McKinney, Pitney Bowes and IBM. And she was brought in because they wanted to go agile, right? Well, luckily enough, at that point, she asked me to lead the agile transformation for her entire organization, which was my product line, which is the major one of the company, and a few others. So I got the chance to learn so much from her and the people that she brought in to do this. So first of all, how we were operating, leaders were rewarded for solving problems and getting things done. I didn't see anything wrong with that. It kind of makes sense to me. So then, go ahead. This is what they brought in. And this became a fundamental way of how we ended up operating, which is in my talk later, but also in how I think about being a leader. So we're going to take you through this. I'll tell you when to click, okay? So has anybody seen this before? This is cool. This is an amazing model. I have a credit down here. This book is amazing too, by the way. The Agile Culture Leading Through Trust and Ownership. Highly recommend it. Can you buy in that leadership or a process can have high control or high trust in it? Does that make sense? And that teams can have a low sense of ownership or a high sense of ownership, right? So that's what this graph is representing. All right, go ahead. All right, so what happens, oh, I already blew it. So what happens when the leaders have a high amount of trust in the team and the team doesn't take ownership? Okay, it's up there. Failure, right? No one cares. I'm trusting you, you're not doing it, boom. How long do you think you live in failure? Not long, right? What happens? What happens when you're sitting there in failure for a while? What's the leader going to do? What's that? Stop trusting. He's going to take back control, right? Of course, he has to. I mean, nothing's happening, right? So command and control. The team does what they're told. Doesn't feel any ownership, but stuff's getting done because they've been told, right? So the leader and probably a lot of the processes are bottlenecks, right? Now, you can live there for decades. In fact, my company has done very well living there for decades prior to our Agile transformation. It's just that you can do better. So what happens if then you're in command and control and the team wants the ownership? Conflict. You're good. And there's not a look ahead, by the way. So conflict. You also cannot stay there long, right? The team's eventually going to get demotivated, wasted effort, Meyer bureaucracy. The good ones leave. The others go back to, all right, we'll just do what we're told. You just can't live in either the failure mode or the conflict mode very long. Right? And of course, what we're trying to get to is there, because that's where you get the innovation from your teams, the energy from everybody. That's where you want to live. And this is not a perfect world. It's not like you're going to be there on everything all the time. But if this is your underlying value system as a leader, it can make a huge difference. So this took what I thought was collaborative leadership like to a whole new level. So now I understand the leader's job is to give that vision, give that what and why, give those boundaries, and support, and step back, and let them take over. I have to make sure they're going after the things that the company needs, and I tell them why, but then step back. And we're going to talk a little bit about what was really clear here. Obviously, this still could be considered basic collaborative leadership. The subtle ways you take away control and don't even realize it. It's almost like the subtle ways, messages you give your children this morning, right? And what impact it has. But you can take away ownership so easily with certain words and doing certain things, and you don't even realize it. And that was the big ahas for me. So when we did this transformation, and again, I talk about later, it was hard for the managers that had been the getting things done to do this. It's hard to be a collaborative leader for many of us anyway. And we actually had to work at it. And so, go ahead. We actually learned what Excelanova, Pollyanna Pixton is the trainers that, and Kent was one of them, by the way, that Sue McKinney brought in, and they taught us some of this stuff. This is called the leadership dance, of when to step back and when to step up. Because, by the way, when we did this, some of the managers basically said, okay, apparently I'm not responsible, and they pretty much just abdicated, right? So this has got to be something between these two extremes that we're talking about. Let's go ahead. So the idea is to step back, but keep focus, right? You should understand what your team is doing, even if you're allowing them to do it. You should have an idea of where they're headed and what they're doing. You don't step away, you step back. And then, if they start to operate outside of that vision and boundaries that you set for them, that's okay to step up. In fact, that's your job to step up at that point, right? And help them understand where, again, you want to, at that point, keep that purpose alive, talk about that vision again. You don't want to come back in and say, what the hell are you doing? Right? You want to do it again in a way that leaves the trust with them, but to let them know, again, here are our boundaries, here's kind of where you're at. What can we do about this? Right? So you step up in a way that still keeps that trust and collaboration going. Whoop, back one. So again, becoming a collaborative leader, at least for me and many of my colleagues at that time, takes practice. I just realized I'm kind of in your way. Takes practice. It takes self-awareness. What? This is a job. I don't need all that touchy-feely stuff. Takes self-awareness. You have to really be able to look at yourself, understand the impacts you're having on people, understand how your words matter even more than maybe you thought, and you have to make thoughtful change to make this shift. Or to, maybe you're kind of there, and as I said, to take it to that next level. Okay, so now let's talk about, we can go one more. Some of the tools that we learned or that I have picked up, and I'm hoping, again, I know so far I've been all talking at you. Please contribute any that you know of or things that have worked for you in this situation. But the first one is called Walk the Floor, and I just kind of talked about that. As you step back, doesn't mean you don't know what's happening on your team. You're down there with them. You're checking in. You're maybe sitting in a meeting, but you're kind of sitting back on the edge, and you're keeping your mouth shut. By the way, tell them what the two Post-its on my laptop, which are obviously not new, been there a while. Tell them what they say.
One says, shut it.
Okay, that's not the laptop lid. All right?
The other one has, it's like a no parking sign, but instead of P, it's R, and then it says P, ?
And that's that reminder to me, as a leader, as a collaborative leader, I can't react. Because you know what my first reaction is? I have an answer for you. So I can't react. I have to pause and try to respond because it's not about me, it's about them. I want a team that is growing and getting better and highly productive and high performing. Then I have to be able to do those things. And unfortunately, I have to keep reminding myself. It's a hard thing. So walk the floor is the first one. Go ahead. This is one I'm sure you've heard, but I have to remember it. Listening to understand. My mind goes so fast. I've got 5 responses for you, and you've got 3 words out of your mouth. And that is a mistake. And to pause and truly listen. And you've heard this, I'm sure. Again, this isn't something, wow, new. But really putting it into practice day after day is hard. Observe. This is the idea to go observe other collaborative leaders, maybe that you think they've got it, see how they react. See what they're doing in those meetings that maybe you would have done differently and think about, oh, whether maybe that's something you should shift. And along with that, trusted feedback. How do you like it when somebody comes and gives you some feedback and say, I got some constructive criticism for you? It's hard, even when that's somebody that you really like and trust, that's hard. But the only way to do that is to do it from having a good relationship with somebody. Right? Because then you might actually be able to listen if you're going to do that at all. So one of the things that we did, we actually observed others, but we also had people observe us. So I would have a trusted colleague, leader, observe me and give me honest feedback afterwards. Because sometimes in the moment, I can't be self-aware enough. I'm trying to be self-aware, but give me that feedback. So that was a big tool that we used a lot. This is one that I brought in from a different part of my life. Goes back to the shut it. I've been in sprint planning meetings and realized I've been the one talking for the last 5 minutes. What is wrong with this? So this one, WAIT stands for why am I talking? And on my really bad days, waste, why am I still talking? And unfortunately, that used to be my post-it, but I shortened it to shut it. But okay. Powerful question. Everybody know about powerful questions? Awesome. And if you have some, I have a list of them that I keep adding to. These were the biggest key for me of being able to in practice, change how I worked with the team. Because I've got so many answers for them. And they don't matter. I'm not close enough to the work. I'm not the one that needs to grow in those areas. So when somebody comes to you, let's say that I'm an architect, and you're an engineer, and you bring me a technical problem, and I say, well, why don't you try XYZ? What's going to happen when he goes back and tries to put that into practice, and it's not going well? Blame me. And he might even try longer and harder to make it work because, of course, that architect knows what they're doing. You might waste time on something that actually isn't going to work, right? So instead, you bring me that problem, and I pull out my powerful questions. Even, what have you tried so far? Or if it's some dilemma, what do you think you should do? It's amazing. People have the answers. Right? They sometimes just need permission. Or they need to just put it on your whiteboard and talk it through with you not giving any answers. You know how that can really help you, right? You do that all the time. Or other things. What have you tried so far? What's gotten in your way? You know, just asking those questions to get them to get out of the chaos of this is not working, to try to find that answer, because they have it, right? So there's many questions like this that you can apply at that point. And again, just the go-to, if nothing else, is what do you think you should do? Especially if they're asking, should I do this, this, or this? What do you think you should do? It's beautiful, it's amazing, it's my favorite tool. And appreciative inquiry. How many of you have been in multi-hour retrospectives on releases that come up with action items that never get done, and people are walking up to the front for their part and trying to hide all the dirty laundry? Appreciative inquiry is a different way of approaching, instead of going to root cause. Now, the 5 whys are wonderful, and sometimes you have to get to root causes on problems to really fix them, right? But appreciative inquiry is about falling forward, right? It helps get out of the blame as much as saying, we're not trying to blame. Oh, you just, probably the way you said that means we probably are. Appreciative inquiry is thinking about where you want to get to. What does it look like to what you're trying to get to? And then looking at how we get there from where we're at today. Okay, it's falling forward rather than backwards into blame. And I'm not saying there isn't sometimes we need to dig for root causes, but if we can use this model more, we actually might get some really good ideas that take us there, because we're not sitting there trying to, again, hide the dirty laundry or feel like we're doing something wrong. Instead of, again, that does not honor failure, right, in learning. So this is a different method. So I'm going to pause there. Does anybody have any tools like along this line, things that you have found or seen that work? I know you have them. Thank you. So making sure they're working on the right pieces. But he just had a simple message that he kept giving. And that's a way of setting boundaries too, right? Especially if he's not telling what the highest thing, I mean, getting to that level of detail, but cool. Others?
Yeah, we like to have the teams, when you get them together and you realize you don't have a team yet, you have a bunch of people working together. Right, so there are different escalators. So
Okay.
that team leadership. But it's kind of fun to have the team member describe what they think that other team member does and add value to the world. And that's can be very dangerous sometimes, but it's a really fun technique because then there's a bond and they apply more value than they typically would apply to themselves.
I love that. So really getting to, especially you automatically made them more collaborative right there by understanding. Yeah. Cool. Any others? I'm going to see where we're at with time. Oh my gosh.
I got one, to go along with what you've been saying over and over again, is looking for and finding your aha moment. Like not every time is an opportunity to speak and teach because if people aren't listening.
That's right. Sometimes they have to be ready for it, right? It was there all along. That's why I say that clarity moment lights that path. It was there. I just wasn't ready to see it.
Another thing I like to do is before we all have advice responsibility. It's always good to ask the other individual if they're open to hearing it. Just simply ask, are you open to some feedback right now? And or are you above the line, below the line? If anybody knows that video, go out there, check that out. And they'll just say, not right now, I'm below the line. That's not a good time, or I'm above the line when we talk.
And even then, and believe me, I give plenty of advice, ask the people around me. Even then, you might even find a way to turn that into powerful questions rather than advice. Or, love it. And the other thing is always, in those kind of situations, to talk about what worked for you. And because it may not work for them, it may not be right for them, right? Any aha moments, any specific ones you want to share? I know you've had them. Go ahead.
You can't rush or expect people to see an answer until they're ready. So there have been times when I think the solution is clear, but I know that until they try a few ways that are going to fail, they're not going to come to the same conclusion that I would have come to. So you're going to waste time trying to convince somebody. I don't know. Let them try to
Let
get there
them do it.
themselves. Can't drag them.
That's awesome. That's good leadership. Did you?
Just let them fail.
Yeah.
It's not so bad.
Yep.
There's a difference between pain and injury. Pain is a teacher, injury is a bad thing. So it's our goal as leaders not to let them injure themselves, but pain is a wonderful teacher.
And that's a good point about the difference between it. Actually, something I don't have in here, but since we're doing well on time. Something else that we learned was the macro cube, and this concept's is out there or whatever. But the idea that when I talked about the leader giving the vision and setting the boundaries, one technique is to draw a cube and think about what the key aspects of any project is that's going on. So sometimes budget is a key one, sometimes not. Sometimes market window is a key one, sometimes not. So whatever your main constraints and things are, it helps you just kind of visualize that, think about what they are, what messages you want to give to your team around those. So again, so you're painting the boundary for them. And then the idea of keeping the purpose alive. And that means repeating that to them or getting some pictorial way of getting that up on the wall in their team room, right? So they're remembering always, these are our boundaries. And then again, step back. They can fail inside that all they want, right? And they'll learn and they'll work in there. But when they start spinning, maybe a little out, you let them see if they can come back. And they start spinning way out here, we're heading towards injury, right? That's, again, where you step up. And again, try to, through reminding them of purpose or asking some power questions, help them in a trusting way, in an empowering way, get back inside the boundaries that we set. And hopefully, again, you're telling them the whys on each of those, right? I love when they give you boundaries and don't tell you whys, especially if they don't kind of make sense. Because the team will just constantly beat up against that wall because it doesn't make sense to them, right? So the whys, and you know that, I mean, that's basic Agile stuff. But again, putting this basic stuff in practice when there's pressures and people stuff, it's hard. So I just think we have to work at it. We have to keep looking for tools. We have to talk with each other and try to get better at it. And I think it's just not quite as easy as it sometimes sounds when you're working with real life people that you can control. So I'm going to move on to this one. So this is my last higher power trip. So I talked about that wonderful VP, Sue McKinney, who brought us a successful Agile transformation. And again, I got a chance to work with her to help our organization do that transformation. And at one point, we were sitting after a session of some kind, and she said to me, "You connect dots for people." And you're probably going, okay. You connect dots for people. I had tears in my eyes because here was a VP that could see me. She saw my unique value. She saw me, not whatever my title was. Having talked earlier about these VPs that wanted me to be a certain thing and only could see value from that viewpoint, she was able to see the unique value and acknowledge it. And it had never happened to me before. It was just mind-blowing. And what's really interesting is by her doing that, and again, giving me that, I am more easily able to look for unique value in somebody else, right? And see if I can't help that shine a little more, or at least not get in the damn way, right? And that's something that also can be hard to remember to do in the pressures of time, et cetera. But everybody has something to give. And we talk all the time about there's so many studies about the power of diversity. Well, diversity isn't just male, female, ethnicity, et cetera. It's diversity of thought, right? The diversity of those unique values. And sometimes it's hard for a team member that's a little unique if the rest of the team's kind of the same, right? Make sure you can see what that unique value is and support them in that. So that was my last aha. So again, I'd say that the key learning here is letting go. It's letting go of control in a lot of cases that I talked about so that others can grow. It's letting go of fear, of letting fear stop you. Fear is, of course, always there. I'm scared to be up here. I actually changed. I'm one of the few people whose Myers-Briggs changed from high I to I am now an extrovert over, again, I'm old, many years. But you know what? I'm barely into extrovert. Nobody who knows me now believes that I was a strong I, but I have grown and I have changed. But it's still fearful for me. So having the courage to acknowledge your fear and to step through it is huge. That's how you grow in anything, but definitely as a leader. Because again, working with people is hard. Finding the things you can control, staying positive about them, helping others to grow, and finding their unique value. To me, these are the keys that I have learned along the way and am still learning every day. So that's what I wanted to share with you guys. I'm hopeful there was maybe something in here. Thank you for at least talking back a little bit. I like interactive sessions much better, but I appreciate your time. I do have, just so you know, by the way, and if any of you want to tell me your story later, if you've got some good, you shared a couple ahas, but I would love to hear them. And I know these slides go out, we don't talk, but I have some references in here. You probably already know all these. Like, as I said, anything Brene Brown ever said or did. If you haven't seen Brene Brown's stuff on vulnerability and you're a leader, please do so. She's got a number of things and books, but there's a TED Talk out there that doesn't take long. Her first one is fantastic. So I'm sure you probably have all heard of her. But what's cool about her, if you don't know, is she is a scientist and she is into the data. And she, unfortunately to herself, proved how important vulnerability and some of these other things are to being leader. And that's some of the same learnings that I've had and I've learned from her. So not personally, but anyway, thank you. I appreciate your time.